Hello and good morning to everyone. My name is Peter Lewis and I am your moderator for today's panel discussion on this World Maritime Day. And we have a very illustrious panel gathered here, and we also are using the technology to get in touch with our colleagues further afield to discuss what is ever so important in terms of the maritime industry and all of its related aspects. Before we get into that, I would like to wish all seafarers and all those involved and engaged in the maritime industry, you know, it's their day, so all the best to you on your day. But what is World Maritime Day, and what are the current issues facing the maritime sector? What does the future hold, and how does the theme, the current theme for World Maritime Day, impact on small island states like us and the wider region? These topics and issues we will deal with. With me this morning, I am pleased to have our very own Director of Maritime Affairs here in the person of Mr. Christopher Alexander. And Mr. Alexander brings a wealth of knowledge and of course experience in the industry. He serves as, of course, the focal point here at SLASPA, the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, in terms of maritime and our maritime directives, in terms of dealing with the administration, that is government, and putting forward the necessary framework to help develop the maritime industry. To his immediate right, we have with us also Mr. Cuthbert Didier, and for those in the St. Lucian and the Caribbean diaspora, they might be familiar with Mr. Didier as being a maritime consultant and having a broad range of experience dealing with us and our issues in these small island developing states. Today we are joined by a gentleman who would like to refer to himself very much as a maritime educator, but he serves as the technical head for the Caribbean at the MTCC in Trinidad and Tobago, but he also does extensive work in terms of preparing other maritime professionals in the person of Mr. Singh. And we'd like to welcome you. Welcome, Mr. Singh. It would be nice for you to have been here with us in the beautiful sunshine which we are experiencing now, but all in all, we are here. And our theme here this year for World Maritime Day is new technologies for greener shipping. New technologies for greener shipping. And we are excited to get into it. I would like to direct my first question to Mr. Alexander. World Maritime Day, what is the general thrust? What is the feeling coming out to lead to a World Maritime Day? If you could give us a little background.
Thank you, moderator. Even before I start my response, I would like to wish the other seafarers out there a productive, healthy, and safe World Maritime Day, and hoping that we can do whatever it takes to enhance the safety of our seafarers in St. Lucia originally, and have an impact in terms of worldwide. Again, in terms of the IMO sees the importance of seafarers being responsible for 90% of shipping cargo worldwide. Hence the importance of any maritime sector, the maritime administration. Often we look at the airlines, however, the airlines as compared to shipping plays a very, very limited role as far as cargo shipping as just one area which shows the importance of the maritime sector. So having seen that importance in terms of the seafarers and the maritime sector impact, the IMO saw the importance, again, moving into the blue economy in terms of developing technologies worldwide, as to have the theme for technologies to enhance greener shipping. And St. Lucia, as a member state of the IMO, and sees the importance of aligning themselves with that theme in terms of the local context, and seeing how we as a member state of the IMO can contribute in terms of greening the shipping sector further. Hence the discussions with our various stakeholders And we're hoping after today's discussion, the local sector and the wider international community will have a greater awareness and sensitization as to the importance of the maritime administration and the maritime sector in general.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. That's quite a bit there, Mr. Alexander. You covered so much. But you brought in something that is very interesting and has been quite a buzz for us here in St. Lucia, and that aspect of the blue economy. And I'd like to bring in Mr. Didier here because it's funny that the theme is greener technologies, but we're dealing with the blue economy and maritime. And once you think of maritime, think of the sea, of course, and the color that resonates is blue. So in terms of that aspect, in terms of the blue economy, Mr. Didier, how do you think that factors in or situates in terms of this thrust by the IMO and the issues of the blue economy?
Thank you, Peter, and I'd like to say hi to all the viewers out there. And World Maritime Day is important. The blue economy is important and has been since the dawn of time, I would say. But more importantly, since the global imperative thrust in the 1980s, leading up to now, the blue economy and by extension shipping, the bloodline of that has been oil, the fossil fuel. And the theme of today's subject, green economy immersed in the blue economy, is relevant because we need to now explore the decarbonization of shipping, and that is going to be critical. We are challenged with the blue economy, but more so looming is this issue of climate change, and shipping all around the world is a bloodline of economies, and the blue economy facilitates that, the use of the ocean. But more importantly, if we do not look for alternative renewable energy sources, we're going to be destroying this planet, and we don't have as yet a plan B in terms of a second planet. So while the blue economy has been robust and efficient and developing, it is now time to take it on a next level, develop new trends, technology that will lead ultimately to decarbonizing and making the shipping more efficient but less of an impact on our environment.
Oh, okay. Wonderful, Mr. Didier. You just connected it for a whole myriad of issues with regards to the economy. But I'd like to bring in our special guest in terms of should I say Captain Singh at this point in time. Captain Singh, we're talking about the IMO and its thrust, and Mr. Didier, along with Mr. Alexander, spoke to the whole emergence and the importance of shipping. Mr. Didier went further to say the bloodline of it being oil. But how does that situate in terms of the current theme and thrust of the IMO at this time?
Thank you. First of all, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Thank you. So I'll first wish the panel and everyone in the audience a very happy World Maritime Day. And also thanks to the director and SLASPA for the invite to discuss this, a very important topic, and I would say raise the visibility and awareness, especially given the theme of World Maritime Day this year. Now, following from where I see is when we look at in general, if we look the need for energy or where we say the oil trade itself, how I see this is a shift. A simple shift of matter. If we go 200 years back, or even more than, just slightly more than a century, the main source of energy was solid. Then which was coal, which still is one of the main source. Then we moved to liquids and slowly transitioning into gas or LNG as a transition fuel. But over this century, we also realized the negative externalities of using the fossil fuels. Certainly, they provided the boost to the economy. The economic growth in last century can somehow be related to the use of these fossil fuels. But then at the same time, we are realizing the negative externalities, including climate change. And slowly there is a way which is taking us, we need to find solutions taking us away from the negative externalities. It is not immediate. If you bring in how IMO is looking at. Now, there are two ways to look at it. First thing is from IMO perspective, certainly the reduction in greenhouse gas measures from ships is high. Because again, given an international industry, the ambition from reducing emissions from ships is not within the context of any one country. It is not within their national targets or ambitions. So under the Framework Convention, UNFCCC on climate change, the shipping is left to IMO, and IMO has certainly in 2018 came up with the first initial greenhouse gas strategy, which has ambitions for 2030, 2040, and 2050. So certainly it has provided some sort of short-term, mid-term, and long-term measures to the shipping industry to reduce its negative impact from the use of fossil fuels.
I love where this conversation is going, because we're talking about everything with regards to shipping. We're dealing with the whole myriad. But how now, in terms of our local context, Mr. Alexander, I'd like to bring you in there, in terms of what are we doing as St. Lucia in terms of embracing that IMO thrust? What are some of the things that we are currently dealing with or have put in place already?
Okay, thank you, Peter. So, Peter, in terms of the local context, and I just want to give you a brief definition in terms of when we speak about green shipping. Mr. Didier spoke about in terms of the blue economy. So when we speak about green shipping, we're speaking in terms of anything a ship can do to decrease the level of carbonization within the environment. And St. Lucia, being a member of the IMO, I've also, part of the obligations, have been signed on to various conventions, including the MAPOL Annexes 1 to 6, and recently signing on to the air pollution, which is Annex 6 of MAPOL. We have gone ahead and taken certain measures in terms of how we're going about controlling ships within our harbor to ensure that they comply in terms of the use of a low sulfur fuel within our ports. And that ties in to the IMO proposed 2020 sulfur limit, wherein the IMO is now working towards halving or cutting by 50% the sulfur content within fuel. And that is something that St. Lucia is obligated to work towards, having signed on to that convention. So in the local context, we have actually gone on board certain vessels and requiring them to present their fuel database or books on board the vessel. And we are cognizant of the fact that certain ships, when they are out on the high seas, they use a heavy sulfur content fuel. However, when they come within port, which we are stressing on them the need for them to switch to a low sulfur content when they are within ports. And that's for two reasons. Again, you have the health component in terms of the heavier fuel usage within a port can have effects upon the health of our persons. We are aware as to the close proximity that the ports are within our population centers. Right. So it's important that St. Lucia, as a member state of the IMO, and to protect our person's health, that we also stress upon the usage of that low fuel content. And on local level as well, we are stressing in terms of the importance of switching from, example, the two-stroke engine, which consumes more fuel, which has a higher emissions level, and moving towards a four-stroke engine. So that's the, again, that's where the policymakers comes in terms of giving concessions to those seafarers, the boat owners, the boat operators, in terms of moving from the less efficient, high pollutant engines and going to safer and more efficient model. And the more efficient vessels are, the cost goes to the customer benefits, because it means that you are paying less for your services, and hopefully the customer will be charged less for the services. So you can see the nexus and the marriage in terms of better efficient engines, low fuel cost, and the customer benefit in that regard. There are other areas again which during the discourse
we'll get
that we will get to.
No, but I love how this is flowing, because immediately I have to get Mr. Didier involved, because we're talking about the blue economy, and Mr. Alexander pointed to the fact that this reduction in our carbon footprint and the changes from 2-stroke to 4-stroke and even their regular inspection of vessels, how does that impact with regards to the blue economy? What steps beyond what the Maritime Affairs Division is taking that you figure would be important at this point in time?
Well, we keep talking about the blue economy, and sometimes I think policymakers look at that as an abstract concept. In St. Lucia, when I think of the blue economy, two places come to mind: Soufrière and Rodney Bay, the Rodney Bay area, one in the north and one in the south of the island. And there's a lot of activity that is, well, the blue economy, whether it's touristic resorts, coastal development, fisher folk, transportation. But I dare say that our economy has not realigned to really maximizing the opportunities within the blue economy. Let me give an example. We have had a spate of some serious road accidents, and we all know that traversing in the south of the island can be a bit challenging during rain. But somehow the island has not pushed forward the ferry service. Ferries with efficient engines, low impact on the water, and also very less impact on the terrain, because to build roads you have to cut, you have to put drains, and when it rains the water ends where? In the blue sea, impacting. So there's a real connection with all of this, but unfortunately I think we're moving too slow to really reassess and put strategies and interventions in place so we can maximize this so-called blue economy. There are user conflicts, there's a need for demarcation, but there's also the need to keep current with trends. Recently I was reading up, there's a place that's the same size of St. Lucia. It's called Singapore, but they are centuries ahead with regard to the development of the blue economy and also expanding on the green economy. The time is now. The time is now for us to take note of these best practices. And like Mr. Alexander said, we can start off with these small engines, but we need to have a very defined strategy. And the IMO helps in that we're signing on these accords and conventions, but I think we need to increase the pace, how we turn these things into laws and therefore regulations and therefore enforcement.
Okay. So the role of law, regulation and enforcement is key in terms of driving the change we want to see. But this is a beautiful time to bring in Captain Singh, because Captain Singh happens to be the technical director at the Maritime Technology Corporation Center for the Caribbean. And I based on the conversation, Captain, could you give us a little more information in terms of what the thrust of that organization is in light of what we are speaking about now?
The MTCC Caribbean, let me say, is one of the 5 centers which were established under the Global MTCC Network project by IMO. The project was funded by EU. So each region in the developing world has one MTCC, like one MTCC in Latin America, Caribbean, Asia, Africa. So and Pacific. So here, as MTCC Caribbean since 2017, we have done approximately 14 capacity building workshops, exercises with more than close to 1,400 participants which involved everything from raising awareness on Marcol Annex 6, as mentioned by the director. Then various technologies. We had the workshops where we provided platform to technology providers to share their technical know-how to the stakeholders within the region. We also did 2 pilot projects to basically create the first baseline of what are the energy efficient technologies used by the commercial shipping which is operating within the Caribbean region. We also started a voluntary fuel reporting system for the vessels arriving in various ports. We were also successful to establish an energy efficiency focal point within the each maritime administration of the Caribbean. So this is the work which we have means the major work. Recently, we completed an emission inventory, greenhouse gas emission inventory for a port in Trinidad. It's still means we are just doing the final edits to that. And in overall, how I see this is a MTCC Caribbean is a center of excellence, I would say, for the region as such, which is supported by IMO in achievement of the initial greenhouse gas strategy. So when we are looking at, say, if we have IMO has an ambition of say reducing annual greenhouse gas emission from international shipping by at least half or by 50% by 2050. Then it's a big task. I mean, we need some action on the ground, whether it is uptake of energy, uptake of technologies, energy efficient technologies, or change in the basic fuel system as such. So this is where MTCC is providing that role to bring the technology and the stakeholders at the same table and see what is more suitable for us. In doing so, we cannot forget the peculiarity of ours as such, like a small island developing states. We are peculiar. We don't have the high volume as compared to other ports. We don't have the, like for example, if we have a comparison study with Singapore, the amount of maritime volume they have, if they take an initiative, it makes a business sense, but it may not make a business sense for any of the small islands. It is a line of sustainability for us. We need to do this not for business, but for our own sustainability, right? So, and plus we are very import dependent. It is a matter of energy security, food security, and all that being said, we contribute very least to greenhouse gas emissions, but we are at the forefront of bearing the outcomes of this climate change. So all this is taken into, I mean, as MTCC Caribbean, I would say what we are looking at is how we can facilitate the action which will benefit the Caribbean region.
Wonderful, Captain. Thank you so much for that. So we got in a snapshot the role of the MTCC and what they have been doing, and I must tell you, Captain, hats off to your group down there and pushing that concept. But I can't help feel, even if may not be directly involved in maritime, I cannot help but feel that this is a mammoth task. This is a mammoth task, and I say so because we're dealing with climate change on one hand. We mentioned the word sustainability. We're talking about the survival of the planet. How do we, what is the first tool?
Well, the first thing here, and I think our colleague already hit on it, we're the least contributors, but in climate change, we're bearing the brunt of it. I mean, right now we're in the hurricane season.
Indeed.
And we just went through a state of potential storms, and everybody in this room can attest how things have been slightly strange for the last 5 days. I think the key thing here is technology and trends. Maybe not as single developing nations, but as the OECS or as CARICOM, we need to have a thrust that can push a paradigm shift. The jobs that we're pushing, we need to change that. We need to get young people studying certain key areas involving technology, whether it's analytic data, whether it's, as Christopher said, the fuel, renewable energies, etc. And more so, we need to maybe collectively stay in line with the trends in the shipping industry. I predict in 8 to 10 years' time, we will have ships built that can self-repair. We will have more autobotics
or robotic technology.
Robotics technology on board ships, which will scale back human error, you know, because we're still slightly dependent on oil, whether it's, we're working away from that, but an oil spill in the Caribbean or a colossal collision with these two ships can bring heavy impact to our environment and strain on our resources. So as small island states, it is critical not only to pass these laws and keep abreast with what IMO is doing, but really keep up with trends and begin to put the changes in our local economy that we have the capacity internally to start building on that foundation.
Wonderful. And I must bring in Mr. Alexander at this point, because Mr. Alexander has been the advocate saying we need to do this, we need to do that, and at every point in time he's always spoken to that. So Mr. Alexander, beyond our legislative and so forth, because I know you spent so much time doing advocacy, whether it's in Viewfort, whether it's in Soufrière, whether it's the fishermen in Grocery and so forth, how do you see us moving towards enacting and making these things workable?
Just to expand on the point that Mr. Didi brought up, I think there's again a need for greater advocacy and to sensitize the policymakers. I think we have done the most that we can within a reasonable time frame, but the need now is how do we go about sensitizing policymakers, making them aware of the impact of not doing anything. Because we speak about the tourism industry, the tourism sector. When cruise ship comes in, they come on a ship. They come on a ship to our ports, and they fall within the Maritime Administration, within the IMO conventions, within the IMO guidelines and regulations. So you have to have the personnel there that can have oversight when those ships come into your port. If not, the ships can do dumping within your port. They can use a higher sulfur content within your port. They can release ballast water within your port. And when I speak in terms of ballast water, I'm referring to a ship going out or entering a port. They take water on board just to ensure their stability. So you can maybe collect water in maybe outside the Castries Harbor. Then you go to another port, maybe Trinidad, for example, and you dump that water. If there are any pathogens or organisms in that water, it's transported to another port. Wow. Again, so you have to ensure that the country has the requisite regulations, the requisite personnel to have oversight in that regard. And the ballast water in terms of, for example, we have the lionfish, and the consensus is that the lionfish came into our area through the transportation of ballast water. Ooh. So here we are right now, species have come in, and it could have devastated our entire fishery stock. So you can see in terms of the importance of having that in place. Likewise, in terms of anti-fouling, St. Lucia have signed on to the anti-fouling convention. We signed on to the ballast water convention, as in maybe most other regional countries. But the Achilles heel for many of our Caribbean states is that it is not promulgated into national legislation. So here we are right now, you go on the IMO website, you may see many of the Caribbean states, they have a signatory to certain conventions, but to enforce that convention, to levy fines against persons, it is not in our national law. That is in terms of the issue that the IMO is trying to address in terms of assisting SIDS, in terms of putting the conventions into national legislation. Without the national legislation, there's not much that the Maritime Administration can do. And we're just a tiny part of the maritime sector as the administration. Indeed. We're acting on behalf of the state. So when people say Maritime Administration, we're just a small component acting on behalf of the state. So the government signs all those conventions, but it's left to the Maritime Administration to enforce and have oversight over those conventions. So it's important that we have a marriage between our legal framework or obligations and not just signing international conventions, which is helpful, but we need to have the laws in place. For example, the Marine Pollution Bill is over like 15 years or so. We have not had a Marine Pollution Bill in St. Lucia. You can recall the Angeline sank a few years ago in Beaufort.
Yes,
and then there was a Russian impetus to have the Marine Pollution Bill promulgated. However, again, it fell, for example, it fell along the wayside, and the emphasis has waned. So I'm trying to get advocacy. I know Mr. Didier is one of the advocates in terms of getting that Marine Pollution Bill on board. That will protect the tourism sector. It will protect the economic lifeblood of St. Lucia. There's a spill. There's not much we can do to get redress because we do not have the laws in place.
Okay, all right. We are moving in the right direction. So now, Commander Singh, I'm saying Commander, sorry, Captain Singh, and I will always remember that he says he's a maritime educator as well. How now does the MTCC, because Mr. Didier spoke about, we need now to work within the OECS and CARICOM because of our relative size. How now does the MTCC and the IMO work to empower these small island states in terms of getting towards the point where we can actually put into motion these conventions?
It's a very important question, and to build on our approach, I very strongly, I mean, not only myself, my colleagues at MTCC, and we support a regional approach, because given our size and volume, it carries more weight. So certainly we need to build a regional approach, and this is where as MTCC we have been reaching out to various platforms of CARICOM to highlight and provide the visibility, and as director was highlighting, I think the signing the convention is one aspect at IMO, but we need to understand the two main things. The majority of conventions cover vessels 400 gross tonnage and above, which is, let's say, international shipping, which visits the small islands. But then there is a second league of shipping, which is very domestic, does not fall under conventions, that also needs some sort of governance or legislation against both safety and pollution matters. So it is important that we develop an approach at regional level. As MTCC, we have been pushing this approach, even as director is aware, on the SMA, which is Senior Maritime Administrations Forum, which is again hosted by IMO, Regional Maritime Advisor from IMO. And then it's again important that as a CARICOM, we have a voice for these matters, which we want to bring to the attention of the international community. As an MTCC, we are guided on our objectives by a regional steering committee. Again, for the purpose of our own activities, we had divided Caribbean into, South, East, and West Caribbean, and within that, we have created a regional steering committee, which guides or informs the further actions of MTCC. So we are in very well support of a regional approach, and we feel that we represent the region, so we are working. It's to the more benefit of the region if we come on a regional approach.
Okay, all right. So definitely we are all agreed that a regional approach is what is going to cement our ability to make these things happen. But I want to go back to something you said, Mr. Didier. You spoke about in terms of our, and you alluded to the capacity building, in terms of getting our young people in a frame of mind to now sort of develop skills that can now come back to create. Could you speak more to that?
But the blue economy encompasses a lot of activity. Recently, Barbados has been the first in the Caribbean islands to open a Ministry of Blue Economy. I know Christopher, Mr. Alexander Fruslasper has submitted a draft maritime framework mapping out the space, our seabed, etc. So if you look at the blue economy relative to the islands, as islands were small, but our maritime space in some cases is 10 times, 15 times greater than the land.
Oh.
And if all these islands can not only have a maritime policy in place and begin to work with having a ministry of the blue economy, from there we can showcase opportunities for the younger generation coming up, and not only provide scholarships, but also provide concessions or incentives for persons in a very responsible, sustainable way to explore, whether it's renewable energy via the sea, aquaculture, coastal developments, tourism, fishing. We tend to rely a lot on the tourism sector, but the time has come for the tourism sector as we know it, brick and mortar on the beach. To change. And there are other areas, whether it's a glass bottom boat, whether it's scuba diving. In St. Lucia we have something called the SMMA, the Soufriere Marine Management Area or Association. How many young people know of the existence? This is the best practice, one of the best practices in the world for user conflict down in Soufriere. And many of them go on boat rides but do not understand the organization structure, the demarcation, the signage, and the layers of policy and interventions from a community level. So advocacy is key, and we need to somehow put this through the school curriculum. Gone are the days where it's just a lawyer, accountant, economist. We need to push areas within the blue economy. And there's also opportunity for revenue and skill building, whether it's yacht registry. St. Lucia hosts the Ark, but does not have a vibrant international yacht registry. So we can have a cadre of young people coming up as captain, first mates, etc., to be the crew on these vessels. And also the support services, because in all this, the end goal is a cleaner environment, decarbonization, preserving the blue water. There are a lot of opportunities there, but we need to talk about it, we need to highlight, because it's funny, we live on an island. Most people on this island can't swim. Most of our lawmakers don't go to the beach. They do not partake in the blue economy, whether it's sailing, whether it's fishing. So like Christopher said, it's very, very difficult reaching that layer, the policy maker and the legislation. And this is a strong role for SLASPA. We have to be creative, but we also have to be a little more aggressive, because like I keep saying, there isn't a plan B planet.
The Toronto, no. So we got to preserve what we have. But you brought up a very important point where I'll bring in Mr. Alexander on. The idea of the maritime boundaries, because you did speak to the idea of, though we're small islands, but we're responsible for so much space. And I can recall you doing this exercise some years ago where we did the whole seabed, and that seemed so very... Tell us a little more, Mr. Alexander, to our maritime boundaries. How does that tie in to our whole theme there of greening and so forth?
Thank you, Peter. So, Peter, in terms of the maritime boundaries, we have signed agreements with Barbados and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And what we did, we used what we call the equidistance model in terms of, for example, if Barbados is 90 nautical miles from St. Lucia, they would half 45 would go towards St. Lucia, 45 would go towards Barbados, and then using equidistance lines to ensure that the separation is done equitably under the United Nations law of the sea.
Okay.
So St. Lucia having conducted those negotiations with the assistance of the Commonwealth Secretariat, St. Lucia now enjoys over 14,000 square kilometers of maritime space. That is legally...
How much is that again?
14,000 square kilometers.
That's a lot of space.
Of legally demarcated maritime space that St. Lucia can access. And access in the terms of doing, like Mr. Did say, aquaculture, in terms of doing drillings, in terms of doing mining, in terms of doing all wind energy and provision for the state. So that's an untapped reservoir, a gold mine that St. Lucia have not even begun to appreciate. And what we're doing right now in terms of going out, again, resensitizing our policymakers, that we only 248 square miles, and we have over 14,000 square miles out there that are accessible. But persons have to be aware, they have to be sensitized in terms of that's out there for us to source. And right now we are now working with the fishers now to bring the awareness to them of the space that they can access right now. And we're working along with the Marine Police in terms of inputting those geographical points within what we call the GPS. So if you go beyond that point, you can get an alert on your GPS that you know you go outside the boundary. But the space is available right now for us to, for example, there's a neighboring island, I wouldn't call it name, and they have already begun to parcel off portions of the sea for leasing. So you can act the same way on land, you can lease a piece of land, a portion of land, the same way in the maritime space. You can actually lease a portion of the maritime space for drilling, for mining, or for research. And we're hoping that, like Mr. Dide said, within that blue economy first, that St. Lucia can look to other neighboring islands' best practices and for us to embrace and adopt those practices. But the maritime boundaries limitation, it's legally accessible under the on clause, and the state right now needs to, again, it's an employment creation as well. And right now the fishers, if you can tell a fisher out there, you can access that amount of maritime space. They'll be more inclined to go to the banks and get a loan, knowing that I have 14,000 square kilometers of space accessible to me. So we're hoping to go in that direction right now. And that's a point that Mr. DJ brought about in terms of bringing, creating employment, bringing the youths on board. So we're hoping that Maritime STASPA to utilize our in-house expertise and working with other agencies, maybe BDCC, to go into the schools. I think the need is now to go to the schools and give them in terms of a career, show them the career opportunities within the maritime sector. We have, I mean, we're behind the curve right now, but it's not too late. I think we have persons there, again, I can speak to Mr. D in terms of the passion to go to the school and educate persons to come on board and source and access the maritime sector.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I cannot help because I have young sons and I cannot help but figure out how that's going to be practiced.
Just to build on another point, the development thrust, specifically of St. Lucia, has been invite investors, they build, you know, they get concessions, and typically these things that they build roll over through ownership and change every 15-20 years. The time has come for strategic national plans involving developing the blue economy,
so
that resource.
Move away
so
from
we
that
need to move, because
model.
whatever we do on land has serious implications for our blue space. And more importantly, there seems to be, I want to be diplomatic with my words. We have to be able to tell these investors what we need, because right now we have a tourism product that might be slightly schizophrenic. We want cruise ships, but we don't have the laws to protect us if they dump stuff. Okay? We want to push yachting, but we don't have the carrying capacity. We want a vibrant maritime tourism product, but we're not dealing with sewage pollution.
Okay.
So we have to put a stake in the ground and develop a strategic plan to keep this environment, not pristine, we'll never get there, I don't think, but safe and sustainable, and while in creating livelihoods. And going back to this decarbonization effort with the green economy, this speaks of us as individuals, you know, our carbon footprint, what we do on a daily basis, how we build, you know, what lighting, the fossil fuel, the cars that we bring in, So again, the development thrust has to change. And IMO is taking the lead, and it's pointing out the directions and the issues, but that has to trickle down into the discourse for national development.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Captain Singh, I really must bring you in here because we're talking about on a national level what we are doing. We have recognized that more effort must be done on a regional, moving towards international level. How, in terms of the advocacy of the IMO with regards to regional bodies like the OECS, CARICOM, and so forth, how is that going?
Okay, let me, if you will allow me, I will touch on two very important points as highlighted by both other speakers. First thing is the visibility, and we have realized this. There's a lack of awareness and visibility within, say, non-maritime stakeholders, and that is the reason why maritime suffers priority when it comes to legislative agendas in various, let's say, Caribbean states. So that is one thing, and that priority will only come with more visibility at every level, not only, I mean, say, within maritime stakeholders, but within our, among MPs, among normal public. So when they are aware that they are surrounded by sea, which is part of a global industry, and how it can benefit the country. So that awareness has to come, and this has to come at a very part of the curriculum in schools or colleges and everywhere. So I very strongly agree with that. And the second part I would like to say from the previous conversation is creating now, as director highlighted that, okay, means we are expanding into maritime, but it is important to benefit from that. And to benefit from that, are we creating an enabling environment? I mean, for the example of fishing, as we said. So if a young man selects to be engaged in fishing or any other service which is related to maritime sector, do we have availability of finance at local level? How easy is it for them to establish a business which is related to maritime sector? So these are the creating that enabling environment is also very key, and highlighting the aspects from the IMO perspective also. I mean, there is a lot of support which I understand from the technical division to the member states in developing national maritime transport policies, basically a strategy which a country can come up, that how they want to play their role, both as a flag state, as a port state, and develop the local maritime sector. So clearly, as a member state and director, I mean, he's aware, and we have seen St. Lucia participating at various workshops, that how they can benefit from various aspects and support which is available at the international level. But again, the initiative, I think we have reached a stage where we need to look inward rather than outward. That, okay, I mean, lot is happening outside, and we should stop looking how others will come and help us. But we first identify what we need to do, how we need to do, because again, each of the small island has its own needs, its own bespoke approach. What is working in Northwest Europe, what is working in Far East Asia may not work in one of our islands. So we need to understand that, look inward, and then approach outside for the support we need, whether it is finance, whether it is investment, and clearly on the terms, I very strongly agree, the terms which are in longer benefit of the islands. We need a long-term orientation when planning these things.
Okay. Oh.
One of the key things in St. Lucia in the maritime sector is the lack or the challenging of getting access to capital. The banking system in St. Lucia is one of the biggest impediments to the development of the blue economy, because banks do not like to give money because they think there's no mortgage on a boat, which is incorrect. The second thing is removing these rather obnoxious duties. Dominica recently passed duty-free concessions on all pleasure crafts. Let me repeat that. Dominica doesn't have marinas, doesn't host an Atlantic rally for cruisers, but to the point that our captain has just made, you know, internally they've created an enabling environment. Make these vessels duty-free. The revenue that you think you're foregoing with these obnoxious duties, you will get as these businesses develop. They will simulate into the economy. They will pay VAT. You know, they will
employ persons, all of that. But
they need to get access to capital. It is easier, much easier to walk in and get a car loan for a BMW of $400,000, and with that amount of money, a young man or woman can buy 2 vessels and start ferry services. Our priorities are just skewed. And we need, as general public, through advocacy, but we need institutions to also put pressure and nudge, you know, whether it's the Department of Maritime, whether it's civil society, to say, listen, we have to be creative. We have to explore what we have. And that's one way of doing it. Removing these obstacles and having a one-on-one conversation with the banking industry to free up that capital.
Okay. It's interesting that you should speak to the banking industry, because one aspect of the actual financial sector that assists a lot with fishers and so forth are the cooperatives. And the cooperatives, not only just the fisher cooperatives, but other financial cooperatives have assisted quite a bit in that regard. But I take your point. It is very important and quite interesting that Dominica is going that way. It's Mr. Alexander, even with what Mr. Didier has brought forward, I know we're talking about greening and we're talking about preserving the planet and so forth, but I cannot help, and my little pin reminds me, of course, of the United Nations and the Millennium Development Goals, which have been broken down and further into the SDGs. How does that play into what your department or what the wider maritime community is engaging in at this time?
Thank you, Peter. Peter, the theme for this year's World Maritime Day, again, it's within the context of the United Nations Development Goals. For example, SG 14 speaks about climate change, and within the context of the greening of shipping, climate change is a top buzzword or a top area that needs to be addressed. And we also have the SDG 14 of that United Nations Development Goals, and it speaks to in terms of the use of the oceans sustainably. And I want to go back to Mr. Didier's point in terms of when we say sustainable use. Persons may want to do the right thing, but if they do not have the resources, they may always remain doing like what the old ways. So we have to give those persons an avenue, an opportunity. The IMO is putting protocols, guidelines in place, okay, to show us, here's the door, open the door for us. But that as member states, as Caribbean islands, we need to go through that door, because the door is already opened by the IMO. The IMO gave us free standards free of charge. The IMO gives the region and the world, okay, I'll be specific to the region, training, technical expertise as well. But we need to walk through that door and start to access the opportunities that the IMO is making available. Yeah. But sadly enough, it's not happening as it should. Mr. Didier spoke about, for example, the ferry service. Now, if we're speaking about greening of the economy, okay, and then you can have, instead of having 20 vessels, for example, going to Martinique, each of those boats is using a level of fuel. And then you have one ferry service. It's that you have now cut down that volume of boats going to and from the region by having one properly equipped and efficient ferry vessel. As we speak right now in St. Lucia, I know our neighboring Sister Island, French Island, have almost 3 or 4 ferries transiting our islands. And as we speak right now, St. Lucia does not have a functional ferry after all those years. I'm saying that, and all the guidelines, all the protocols are there. The IMO have made it accessible to us, but Mr. Dide is quite right in terms of the reluctance of the banking institutions to give our nationals the opportunity. I mean, persons have come to the Maritime Administration. I'm sure, likewise, other Caribbean member states say that, Alexander, I want to get involved in the ferry service, but I just not getting an opportunity, okay, for me to go to that area. So I'm saying that we have to give our nationals, show them to protect the maritime sector, because there are opportunities for you within the sector. Likewise, tourism. We have to show our nationals there are benefits for you all if you can protect the tourism sector, but we must make it accessible for them so that they can protect the sector even more.
Yeah, I take your point, Mr. Alexander, because one of the things I think people don't appreciate is that within the maritime sector, it is not knee-jerk. I mean, you have a boat, you're going to do ferry service, you need insurance, you need to make sure your parts are
registration,
your crew, your registration, and it is something that has to be done in accord. So sometimes, even before being able to make $1, anybody in that industry has expended so much. And so I think that even what we're doing here today and other activities of that sort to resonate in the minds of people how extensive engaging within the maritime sector is. I would like to take some time to put out some information on MTCC Caribbean, and if you permit me, Captain Singh, and to let our persons participating online, we've not forgotten you, and we thank you so very much for staying with us. Very interesting discussion. I'm thinking I'm going to apply for some kind of role within the maritime sector, because it covers so much. But the Maritime Technology Corporation Center operates under and is hosted by the University of Trinidad and Tobago in Trinidad. The capacity building for climate mitigation in the maritime shipping industry project is a joint IMO and UN initiative aimed at reducing greenhouse gas and other emissions, as well as promoting energy efficiency in the maritime shipping industry, and is funded by the European Union. Under the MTC Network, GMN project, the 5 regional MTCCs will deliver the agreed project milestones over a 3-year period, making a significant contribution to the IMO's continuing widespread efforts to ensure effective implementation and the enforcement of the global energy efficiency regulations for international shipping. It enhances awareness and uptake of environmentally sound technologies, aligning training programs to meet these needs, facilitating partnerships enhancing maritime energy efficiency, and providing a baseline on compliance of MARPOL Annex 6. So in a nutshell, this is when we speak with Captain Singh, we're speaking about that entity that brings in all of that support, an IMO created entity. So, Commander, I keep saying Commander. I think I'm pushing for your elevation. Commander. I think I'm pushing towards your elevation, Captain Singh. We've dealt with so many aspects. We've dealt with the human aspect. We've dealt with the legislative aspect. We spoke about technology. Where, as an educator, a maritime educator, where do you see us going from this point in enabling us to get into these new technologies for that greener shipping?
Okay, it's a very valid question. I think as I said, I mean, where do we see ourselves going from here? Now, clearly, IMO has defined the path for international shipping, and somewhere as small island states, we are in their priority, and when it is even the framework convention speaks about equitable transition into the future, along with SDG agenda. So it's very how we approach this, I think, it shouldn't be seen as a challenge in our growth, but we can, as small island states, I like to view this as an opportunity, right? Here is a paradigm shift happening in shipping. Uh, let's take an example for Caribbean, the data which we collect. The average age of vessel flying in Caribbean is 16 years. I was going through some data. The average age of international vessels arriving in St. Lucia is about 18 years. So these ships, we cannot see a business case if we say, okay, let's retrofit them with a new technology or something. It won't make sense for all of them. So it will need a lot of input in how we replace this shipping. How are we connecting to each other within the Caribbean? How we are taking care for the needs given the highly import dependent economies? How we can take care for each other? So a lot of short sea shipping, something which we can look into. And going forward, we need to look into the opportunities. I mean, okay, we may not be one of the main bunkering ports in past, but now we see that in 10 years, there will be alternative fuels. So are we investing on the shore side? How is the energy mix changing on the shore side under the Paris Agreement? So if we are changing, if we are developing biofuels, if we are developing solar energy, wind energy, are we taking that, the demand for the port or the associated maritime traffic in our consideration? Because if we are looking at to develop a marina, there will be say 100 yachts at any given time. We want to supply them with power. Are we taking that into account when we are developing a solar plant or a wind powered electric plant? So all that has to, we need to look into. We need to look into the aspects where we can create opportunities, and certainly I see a lot of scope because we have advantages. Our scales are, it presents us a challenge. We are small, but at the same time, it gives us an opportunity. We don't need much to make certain changes. So if we get support from international community, especially on the financial aspects, where we can lower the initial risks, because certainly maritime sector is seen by our local banks as a high risk investment, or even commercial banking sees this as a high risk investment. So we need support either from government or from the external funders like EU or World Bank or IDB or anything, where they can, through different models like PPP model or any other model, where we can reduce the risk for commercial or private financing, and that will bring in opportunities. Another thing where what we need to do is increase, I would say, trust and transparency. This is again learning from last 5 years working in Caribbean. I think this is what we need. I mean, we need to share data on the shipping. We need to share data on what's happening within the maritime sector within the Caribbean, because then we can help each other in developing individually and collectively both. I think trust and transparency among ports, among maritime stakeholders is also one key thing, because we speak a lot about data, but it's not easy. It exists there, but we don't have that data. So that is another thing which we need to look into. As MTCC Caribbean, we are looking into moving slowly from capacity building. It will still remain as the core of the activities, but to provide more, sponsor specific projects, which would be better connected and motivated from the specific needs. So for example, if we identify with the Maritime Administration in St. Lucia, okay, this is what we need. We have an ambition of doing something, then we can bring some international donor and create a project very specific to that, because we understand the regional approach and regional reach. But then, as I said earlier, individually we have very specific peculiarities, and we need to take that into account.
Oh, Captain, could you please tell us, Captain, for the purpose of our persons who have signed on to this discussion, where exactly in the world are you at this point in time?
Oh, okay. Let me clear both things. You clarified that the MTCC Caribbean is hosted by the Center for Maritime and Ocean Studies in the University of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
And I'm linked with them, and currently I'm in Gibraltar at the University of Gibraltar.
Okay. No, the reason why I want to say that is that I would like to highlight the importance of that. And we want to thank you so much, Captain, for being a part of that, because we know you are some hours ahead and yet participating on this. And we appreciate tremendously your effort with regards to this discussion. But what you brought out here ties in so nicely. And I wanted you to tell us where you were in the world so that it can be clear for those partaking of this this discussion, that they can recognize that neither you and Mr. Alexander or Mr. Didier have had conversation, but yet still, as advocates and persons working within the industry, that the thought process is very much connected, and this is the thrust, and this is very, very uniform. We have a very interesting situation. We now have questions coming in from some of our online viewers, and they're asking certain questions to some of our persons here. One of them is towards Mr. Didier, and the person is asking, Mr. Didier, does the blue economy include safety standards for the yachting system, especially Soufriere, Marigot, and Rodney Bay?
Well, definitely, it has to. There are a lot of standards that need to apply once you're engaging in boating or you're on the sea. Unfortunately, the challenge is enforcement in St. Lucia. The best approach is to self-regulate, and the Soufriere Marine Management Area attempts to do that. I say attempts because in recent years there have been some challenges in terms of persons not abiding to the rules. But the SMMA came out of the discussion and seeking remedy for user conflicts within the community. So definitely to answer the person. However, recently I have seen persons not, respecting the rules of the road in terms of how they drive vessels, where they berth, where they anchor, the speed limits, etc. And while the owners may be on spur in the Maritime Division, ultimately you need the Marine Police intervention, and we need to have a system where we can not only police, but we can prosecute. It's time that we have presence on the water and we issue tickets just like we do on the road, etc., so that people can conform, and it will be a safer environment for all of us, because there are many users. There are fisher folk, there are swimmers, there are divers,
the jet skis,
there are persons on the beach. That there should not be jet skis in the SMMA area, but there are dinghies, etc. There are power boats, there are yachts, there are mega yachts, and there are divers. So there's a lot of potential user conflict, and the SMMA is the first line of defense, but persons who are trained through Mr. Alexander's office and the Marine Police should know the rules of engagement.
Okay, but you spoke to Soufriere. So now Rodney Bay and Marigot Bay, Mr. Alexander, in terms of what we see there in terms of safety and security.
In terms of what Mr. Didier just alluded to, there's, before any person can go behind the wheel of a vessel now in St. Lucia, the law makes it clear the person have to undergo certain training. They have to be certified by STASPA through the Maritime Division. And part of the training captures in terms of rules of the road, in terms of how you maneuver the vessel, and security and safety. So all that's captured within the training. However, unfortunately, after persons get certified, then they sometimes they do not adhere to the principles of their training, and that's where the issue comes in play. However, the laws apply whether you are in Soufriere, in Marigot Bay, or Rodney Bay. The same rules of the road apply across the board. Those rules are national rules. Mr. Didier spoke about in terms of the ticketing system, and what the Maritime Division have done. They've actually forwarded a draft ticketing regulation. Beautiful. And I think that's very, very, very innovative. I mean, it's only one island in the Caribbean who have taken that approach. So the same way you have a traffic officer that can issue you a ticket if there's an infringement, we wanted to adopt that same technique in St. Lucia. We issue you a ticket if you violate the maritime rules. Again, that frees up the court system, which we know it's a bit challenging right now. And then customs officer, a marine police officer, a port police officer, persons who are authorized within the Shipping Act, they can issue out that ticket. So we're hoping that will come into fruition very soon, again, to enhance the safety regime within our ports, whether it be up north or south. But again, it's a work in progress.
Okay, all right. We have another concern. Somebody said that there are a few young men who are asking how do they enter into maritime and who they should contact because of their interest in learning. Further to that, it's asked Mr. Didier. So that one is for you, Mr. Alexander, and the one for Mr. Didier is, how soon will the blue economy and its related subject matter as raised by you be something we speak about in schools?
Well, that's a very loaded question. Recently, the government got a loan from the World Bank for about 18 million US dollars in reference to the blue economy and livelihoods specific to single mothers. So I would think as part of the rollout, that project is going to be hosted in the Prime Minister's office. As part of the rollout, one of the key initiatives must be advocacy and reaching out to schools and informing them. I want to just tell the person who asked that question, if you, like I started out saying, SUFRE probably represents the best example of the blue economy happening in a very informal way. You take a drive down to SUFRE and you stay by the waterfront and you look at all the activity going on there, and by extension the impact on the land. And this is not by any master stroke. This has evolved over 50, 60 years and continues to evolve. The opportunity we now have is to put structure, to build capacity, and also to address social issues, environmental issues, and in a very key way propel the nation, the country, to really observing the value of not only our coastline but our marine resources. And key in all this are the fisher folk. Every time we build something on the coastline and there's a runoff and rain falls, we are impacting on the livelihoods of fishermen. So they are slowly pushed further and further away. And these are real-time challenges. So the blue economy, I'm hoping for the Prime Minister's office, the powers that be, that they roll out the information. And the first place they should start with are definitely the schools, and then the private sector, engage in civic society, etc.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Alexander, in terms of somebody having interest in maritime, what in terms of their contact point and what they can do to get in?
So in terms of maritime, like I said earlier on, there are opportunities available to our nationals. For example, persons, we are now about launching training, what we call STCW training, and persons are very interested in that, which is the standard of training for certified watchkeepers, wherein persons going on cruise ships. A few years ago, they would have to go and train in Jamaica, in Trinidad, and other islands within the Caribbean. However, for the past 2 or 3 years, St. Lucia have now promulgated that legislation. We've spoken to 4 entities, and they have come on board in terms of to start training our nationals. So after you've received that training, there's no need for you to go to other outlying islands and incur the cost of traveling, the cost of accommodation. That can be done nationally. So hence we should have an increased pool of persons coming within the sector. For example, if you want to become a crew right now, the Marine Police is our premier institution that develops and does the training for that sector. And we have over 600 crew members in St. Lucia that are working on our commercial vessels. And likewise, the boat masters training as well. That's a 6-week training regime. Again, the Marine Police and 2 other institutions are doing that training. So there are opportunities there. Likewise, Mr. Didier spoke about the other subsectors in terms of the fiberglassing, the engine repair. But speaking about engine repairs right now, as part of our new first, we will start whenever we are doing training with our seafarers, especially our fishers. We'll have a component of engine, let's say not engine repairs, engine maintenance.
Okay.
Because we realize some of our fishers, they go adrift, and maybe the engine, normally they have one outboard, it breaks down, and they go adrift. When those fishers go adrift, it costs the island or the state tremendous amounts of money to deploy helicopters and aviation assets from Martinique to deploy the Coast Guard boats. You have 5 men out there for a day, fuel is being burnt. So if we can train, and the whole first, within the next month or so, is to go around the entire island and to train our fishers. I think we've done a good job as far as our commercial operators are concerned, but I think right now we have to bring the others on board and train the fishers and sensitize them so that they can have a meaningful impact and wouldn't have any risk associated with the fishing industry.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So now that you have given us the local context, and thank you so very much, gentlemen, and I know the person who asked the question will be very happy for these answers. In terms of, I would like to bring in Captain at this point, because with the MTCC as part of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, what, apart from, I mean, the larger mandate of the MTCC, what through the University of Trinidad and Tobago, if anything, is the MTCC spearheading in terms of training on a regional aspect? On a regional
as director spoke about the say training, maritime training at a local level, but if there are people who are interested in international shipping, and certainly the university offers diplomas, BScs or MScs, which are aimed at both international shipping, becoming officers on larger vessels, including various roles in the logistics supply chain, means which facilitates the shore side of the shipping. So certainly, depending upon the interest of the candidate, they can approach the university and then choose a program which is appropriately answering their career needs. And as for the sustainability in shipping and the greener technologies or greener shipping, this is all part of our modern curriculum, I would say. And the idea again is to align the graduates with what industry needs. So you will experience that anybody graduating from the university is not going to learn the job once they graduate, but their professional life actually starts once they come on board the maritime programs in the university, and they will be industry ready by the time they graduate.
Okay, wonderful. So we have training available locally, and we also have extra regional training which can lead to international certification and so forth. So we pretty much solid there. I want to go back because our theme is very central to this in terms of new technologies for greener shipping, and I would like to bring Mr. Alexander in here. Recently we had this audit. I heard talk of this audit. What ISMAS? What does
IMSAS?
IMSAS, and what does that mean for us? And did we pass? If we pass, what does that mean? And if we failed, or if we still have things to work on, where are we going in terms of St. Lucia and that audit?
Thank you, Peter. So, Peter, in 2018, the IMO conducted what they call a mandatory audit of St. Lucia's maritime sector. And it's not just of SLASPA, it's of St. Lucia's maritime sector. They went to Ministry of Tourism, the Health Ministry, They went to the Marine Police, all agencies or all NGOs that plays a part within the maritime sector. That audit was compiled. And the audit showed that one of our main issues was in terms of the lack of allocation of sufficient human resources to conduct our mandatory obligations within the IMO. So the state has signed on to certain IMO conventions, and we have given the IMO the undertaking that the country will implement those measures. And it's almost like a contractual obligation between the state and the IMO. So the audit revealed that St. Lucia was not conforming in terms of to many of those areas that we were supposed to implement. And one of the main ones was in terms of the marine pollution bill. We did not do fare well as far as the marine pollution bill was concerned. Again, and the marine pollution ties in into the blue economy as well as the topic at hand. So that's one area that St. Lucia needs to address. Again, the draft is before the relevant agency, but we need to have that promulgated into our national law. The audit also revealed, likewise, in terms of when you look at our coastline, that we had vessels going along our coastline. They did not have holding tanks. And that's an issue, a great issue that's developing right now. We have some boats, vessels, they actually purchase the vessels with holding tanks. And when I say holding tanks, it means in terms of if you use the toilet facility on board the ship, it's supposed to be retained on board. And when it's filled, you go out and you have it dumped 3 nautical miles from shore. So now we're revisiting the idea in terms of when a new ship comes on our ship registry that they have holding tanks. But as of now, you have boats coming close to our bathing areas and they are utilizing the toilet facility on board without any penalization because of the lack of not having the requisite laws in place. So all those laws in terms of the sewage, the plastic, the air pollution, all those laws are captured within the elusive marine pollution bill. So that's something that the IMSAS audit revealed that the state needs to adhere to. And that document will be published sooner or later in the international community. So if an investor who wants to come to St. Lucia, they say, okay, let's revisit in terms of St. Lucia's compliance level. It can be a negative result or a negative impact on St. Lucia because the country is not complying with international regulations or standards. It can hamper investors coming to the island. So that's one area we need to address to ensure we can compete with other Caribbean islands or even internationally.
Okay, all right. So we're on the way to getting better. We are starting to fix certain things and putting in other towards our.
But it goes back again, like we said earlier on, in terms of making our policymakers aware. Here is what can happen if you do not take action. Okay. And there's a huge financial cost to inaction by requisite policymakers to protect the maritime sector. When I say maritime sector, the tourism sector plays, I mean, it's a huge part of the maritime sector. So we need to protect what we have, the golden, what do you call it, the golden egg.
Yes, indeed.
So we need to put the regulations, have oversight to protect that key, the lifeblood of St. Lucia.
Okay, wonderful. And I will go back to Mr. Didier here because we're talking about the blue economy and so forth. It still sounds a little abstract. So I mean, you did break it down quite a bit and state to us in terms of opportunities and so forth. But as it stands here in St. Lucia, and we're happy to hear that we're getting financial resources towards that. as it stands now, how does that play out in terms of, if I were to try to box it in, how does that play out for us?
Well, it'd be very difficult to box it in because there's a lot of cross-fertilization with a number of the activities.
Okay.
You have transportation, you have tourism, you have resorts, you have fisheries, you have potential renewable energy,
Okay.
You have pollution. So I think the first approach for rolling out this Blue Economy Initiative is to give it ownership. And this is my opinion, my humble opinion. The best ownership would be to create a Ministry of the Blue Economy. And that would have to interface with all the existing other ministries or agencies that support these ongoing activities. The second thing would be to do an inventory to see whether these activities are sustainable or need capacity building and evaluate them. Now, the Blue Economy key measure would be social, economic, and environment. And the cross-fertilization in all these activities, Mr. Alexander heads the Maritime Division, and that addresses a lot of the activities on the water for now. But there are other agencies, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Sustainable Development, I can go on and on and on, Ministry of Finance.
Fisheries.
So, if we are to approach this, there must be a very focused strategy involving all the various, in fact, maybe the entire government might be better put. And I'll use SUFRE for example. When you look at SUFRE, there are 3 different agencies all collecting the same data, but they don't speak to each other. There's the SMMA, SUFRE Marine Management Area. There's the SUFRE Development Foundation. Then there's the PMA. They're all located in one small locale. They don't share data. They don't have a common approach to dealing with issues, whether it's conflicts or challenges. We cannot start up the blue economy or managing the blue economy or developing more the blue economy in that way. We need to have a focal point and from there spread. I think one agency that can help is the agency that Mr. Singh represents.
The MTCC.
I think the MTCC can reach out to all these islands because the Caribbean islands are great at exporting our culture. You hear reggae music playing everywhere in the world. There wasn't a paper to do that. The same for Calypso. We've exported Carnival. But we need as island states to stop competing and start complementing. Many islands, one sea. One sea. That's the connectivity. Whether you're in Trinidad, whether you're in Guyana, or whether you're up north. And if the MTCC can regionally come together, find out what our needs are, what our challenges are, and where are the gaps. Where are the gaps? Because if we are going to keep in time with the trends, in 10 years' time, shipping as we know it is going to be different. You know, I mean, the advances of science and what is happening and the big pressure on this climate change and no planet B. And we collectively as a region, we have to make sure that we don't miss the boat. But at the same time, we should not be duplicating efforts. We have limited resources, but not because we're small doesn't mean that we can't get it. You know, we do a lot of things well, you know, and I think listening to this discussion, maybe outside of OECS or CARICOM, this agency can be able to pull these islands together, bring up the issues specific to shipping, the challenges and the expectations, and from there move forward. And I think that will also be a contributing factor to how we roll out the blue economy.
Oh, okay. So, Captain, we're bringing you in here, Captain, and Mr. Didier called the number. So, Captain, we've acknowledged the work that the MTCC is doing and the fact that it has enabled all this capacity building throughout the region. How do you respond to some of what Mr. Didier brought up in terms of the MCC?
It's a very valid expectation. Let me put it this way, and we stand out and we understand that expectation, and we have certainly received support also from the member states within the Caribbean, including Saint Lucia in the say the IMO platform. The need for the support to MTCC Caribbean as such. But we still need to understand, and as I said earlier, and just now again this point was emphasized, we need to stop competing and start collaborating as islands. If I can share here a piece of information, for example, let's say a cruise vessel, which is calling many islands within their say 7-day cruise or whatever, and it comes into a port, spends about 12 hours on an approximate. In 12 hours, it consumes about say 21 tons of HFO. That would lead to about 68 tons of CO2 emission while alongside. Now, this piece of information, if we need to know from the operator or we need to know certain data from the vessel operators or cruise ship operators, the company, that how much fuel you are consuming, the type of fuel, the carbon content while you are alongside in my water. So we know that what kind of emissions are happening within, my port while you are alongside. And given our very close proximity of urban population to ports, it does have impacts. So we need to know that. But if we are put across by operators or by industry or strong-armed into a case, okay, we cannot share this data. If you make this data mandatory to share, we are not going to call your port or things like that. I mean, this is where what happens. Certainly we know the ship owners are not easy person to deal with, but if we have a collective phase, okay, so you're not going to give me this data, so certainly you have repercussions calling my ports. But then there should not be another island which says, okay, if you cannot call Saint Lucia because they are becoming strict, you are welcome here. We don't want that to happen. And that's why this regional approach and collaboration is important. And we do understand and validate our role as MTCC Caribbean that yes, going forward, this is what we want to create and bring awareness and visibility that if we will have a regional approach, we will be better placed to deal with the commercial operators or international shipping in the benefit of the islands.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Ms. Alexander, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, again, I'm Captain, in terms of the wider Caribbean context, and your point is valid, because I can recall a few years ago, we had what we call the wider Caribbean in terms of for waste reception. And the idea was that each Caribbean member state, for example, Eastern Lucia said we would have taken plastic from a cruise ship. Another port, maybe with a used sewage plant, would have taken the sewage. So all the Caribbean islands would have collaborated to see which one can receive waste from those ships. And that would have made the Caribbean region a cleaner environment. However, after all the discussions were undertaken, there was no implementation in that regard. So unfortunately, Captain, and we have quite a few regional discussions, but then the issue always boils down to the actual implementation of those agreements. In St. Lucia right now, we have quite a few cruise ships that come into our port, and when they are alongside, they are making requests to, for example, to utilize, to dump ballast water within our port. And then under the conventions that we sign on to, I mean, that's a no-no, because you can bring in invasive species within your port. They have also making requests in terms of utilizing a certain grade of fuel whilst alongside. And that's a continuous request from those cruise liners. So I'm saying that every Caribbean country, for example, can have the standard response. Here is the type of fuel you can use whilst alongside. So whenever a cruise ship enters the Caribbean region, they would know that is the type of fuel with the sulfur content that you can utilize within the Caribbean region, and not one Caribbean island lowering the standard just to get the trade from a cruise ship, and which will negatively impact the entire region. So the Caribbean context is valid, but it's a matter of implementing agreements that we've formulated through discussion within the region. And that is one of our main issues at hand within the Caribbean maritime context.
Okay. So clearly we are seeing that not only is the maritime blue economy such a vast aspect of our lives and so important to regional economies, but really to the world as a whole. I think it would be remiss of me as moderator not to speak of how the COVID-19 pandemic brought the maritime industry to the fore. Because while we had all of this confusion throughout the world, it is the one aspect that ensured the world stayed alive. And I cannot help but borrow Mr. DJ's point. We don't have another earth to go to, and the importance of us taking care of what we have at present. So the IMO's theme right now is very apt in terms of the space we are moving in. I cannot help but recognize the fact that as an educator, our panel is so well blended. We have an esteemed educator who deals with training maritime professionals. We have somebody who's actually executing within the office on a national level. We have somebody else who is consulting and advocating in terms of best practice in terms of our esteemed panel. And I don't know, who should I give my CV to? I'm only being funny here. But yes, I at this moment I'd like to speak to our persons who are very much on the call and a part of this discussion, that they can appreciate how important the contribution of all of our presenters have been today, and how relevant this is for all of us in terms of as nationals of St. Lucia, as nationals of the Caribbean region, and as people of the world in terms of preserving our environment and ensuring that there is not only profitability but sustainability for generations to come. With that, I would like to invite you gentlemen to give us that salvo, to tell us that to leave with our discussion some words that you really think that should sink in for people right now. Mr. Didier,
I'm the opening batsman.
I'll tell you as the opening bat.
Well, years ago, I remember having a discussion with the late Arch Merez, and he told me he always thought that St. Lucia should be marketed as a peace zone because we don't invade each other and we all have rum and volcanoes. And I thought that was, I walked away and I like you, I chuckled. But the net of it is, he was also expanding on, what makes us unique is probably our size, but more so our geographic location. And we are a set of islands nested in probably some of the best waters in the world, playground, resources, etc. And what seems to be very obvious is sometimes not. And it's an uphill battle to really provide the policymakers and the legislators and the person in the corridors of power that there are alternatives. We have to think creative. And the sea, that sea that ushered in Columbus, 1492, that same sea that has so many stories, it covers the biggest span of space on Earth. So I think Mr. Singh probably hit the nail on the head in that theme, that we complement each other, we don't compete. And there are some issues that in the future we will have to come together, work with the trends, the technologies to give livelihoods and to sustain our environment. And the blue economy and the decarbonization of our region is going to be critical, and we're going to have to work together, not only within our communities, not only citizens on each island, but as a region.
Thank you so very much for that. Thank you so very much for that. Captain Singh, your parting words with us.
Thank you. What I would say is just extend the similar thoughts, which I would say is that I mean we have challenges, we have opportunities, but I think we are at a time. This is our responsibility in whatever capacity we can contribute, right? So we, while we explore the full potential of, say, shipping industry, or how certain solutions or certain actions can contribute to the generational challenge of achieving, say, sustainable development, it is important. But at the same time, how we can induce certain behaviors, certain cultures, which will aim for a say a better environment, better approach, or better way how we approach to the planet, and that is key. Certainly, this is not a case, as I said earlier, of any business or anything. For us, it is the case of survival as small islands. As I said, we are the least contributors to the greenhouse gases, but with the sea level rise and the other aspects, we bear the forefront. And given the theme, we still did not speak about the trade-offs, because when we are speaking of sustainability, we are speaking of the environmental actions. But sustainability is not only keeping environment, but at the same time, we need to look at the social and economic aspects. So tomorrow, if shipping is changing in a way which is going to increase the cost of shipping, how will it impact the lives on our small islands, the cost of living? What will happen to that? So, or other social impacts. How are we investing to take care of that? Are we going to grow a part of our imports? Or how are we going to become less dependent on certain aspects of shipping? So these are important considerations. And I think the start point is whatever capacity we are, while we look for better, actions, or we spoke about legislation which can take years to come in, but then there are low hanging fruits which we must think about, engage with stakeholders, and start action. I think we are already late in action, and it is in better for everyone as a planet that we start acting in our own individual capacity, whatever we can do. I will close on that. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that, sir. Thank you so very much. Mr. Alexander?
Thank you, moderator. And I'm sure the moderator will thank Captain Singh, but from a Maritime Division perspective, and knowing the training that MTCC has offered to St. Lucia, I wouldn't even say the Maritime Division. We wanted to express the Maritime Division's personal thanks to MTCC, for Captain Singh, for the offerings of the training and the guidance that given us thus far. I think after the COVID period, I think COVID would have been the best advocate for the maritime sector. And I say that because COVID showed the world and persons who are blinded, well, they want to remain blind. But I think COVID showed us the importance of the maritime sector. When the airlines were all those different protocols, the airlines to fly, shipping continued. Containers were coming in. Okay, we were able to get goods on our shelves. So I think COVID showed us, anybody was aware of the importance of the Central Maritime Division, of the maritime sector in general. And I think the discussion here, in terms of going broader, we can say where savings can be had in terms of using efficient means of operating. And we want to go out even further, educate our seafarers, our maritime sector, and guide them, let them realize the opportunities available within the maritime sector. How does it benefit our nationals? And saying that we would need in terms of buy-in. And that's one of the key downfalls of administrations within the region, is to get the buy-in from the policymakers. We're on the table here, I think we are advocates. However, we need to get the buy-in. We need to persons to realize, see the opportunities that the employment, health reasons, the economy, all that's within the maritime sector, within the blue economy. I see the blue economy as almost a marriage between the blue economy and the maritime sector. So the Maritime Administration, we are there to offer our services, our advice. We're willing to work with any other agency, any NGOs out there for the betterment of St. Lucia's maritime sector. So I want to again thank the moderator and thank the other participants. It was a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to further discussions with other persons of like-mindedness and persons we can bring across to see things for the national good.
Okay, beautiful. Well, with that, I would like to thank each and every single one of you for staying with us for this most interesting panel discussion. Special thanks, of course, to Captain Singh, who is the technical expert with the MTCC in Trinidad. And we know that he's stayed on the call all the way in Gibraltar, and we are so very thankful for him for being a part of the discussion. Special thanks also to Mr. Cuthbert Didier, who is a maritime consultant here with us. And also we have in-house our Director of Maritime Affairs in the person of Mr. Christopher Alexander. Not forgetting all maritime-related professionals, those seafarers out there, those on the catamarans, the fishers, everybody, wishing you a wonderful day. Today is your day, and World Maritime Day comes under the theme, New Technologies for Greener Shipping. So with that, I am Peter Lewis, your moderator. Thank you so very much, and have a wonderful day.